This is the Northern Ireland.
And we're live, members.
Okay, so good morning everybody and welcome to the 75th meeting of the Economy Committee. Some members will be attending this morning's meeting via Starleaf, and witnesses for today's briefing will attend via Starleaf. The meeting will be broadcast live when open to the public, and a recording will be made available on the committee's web pages on the Assembly website. And just to remind members that the bill briefing will be hands up per protocol, and just to remind members all their tablet devices when they're not in F4. So moving on then to item number 1, which is from Keith Buchanan and Peter Weir. I think expecting all other members to join us, so no other apologies I believe have been noted, Peter?
No, not that we're aware of.
Okay, thank you. So moving on then to item number 2, which is our draft minutes. There's a copy of the draft minutes at the meeting held on the 6th of October at page 5 of our pack. Are members content that those are an accurate reflection of the meeting?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. So moving on then to item number 3, which is Chair's business, and there's a number of items under Chair's business this morning. At page 4 of the table papers, there's a clerk's memo providing an update on the informal meeting that we had of Chief Executive of the airport on the 7th of October. The meeting focused on 3 key issues, which were the NIDACs reform, so that's the Aviation Kickstart Scheme, APD, and duty-free and tax. So there, at page 8 of our table papers, there's a report on improving the North Aviation connectivity by Oxford Economics that was commissioned by the department, and it makes some recommendations around APD. At page 94 of table papers, there is Sir Peter Hendy's interim report from his union connectivity review, and this also makes comment on ways to improve the North connectivity. So if members were content that we would write to the Secretary of State for the North to highlight the issues that have been raised by the airport and seek his the British to the Economy and Finance Ministers regarding the issues that have been raised by the airports around the NIDAC scheme, around APD and duty-free and travel restrictions and messaging. And additionally, that we asked DFE to look at Oxford Economics paper on connectivity and to put some pressure on the British report from Sir Peter Hendy as well. And also that we would write to the British government around levelling up funding. So would members be content with those proposals?
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So then we will be dealing with items 3.1 and 3.2, which are both in relation to the utility regulators presentation on energy price rises. As members will recall, we had an informal meeting with the utility regulator last Friday, and some very concerning briefings around the of energy in relation to the cost of gas. Can you hear me?
Chair,
okay?
you're breaking up a wee bit. If you want to go to just sound, that might help.
Problem, Peter? I'm not the camera up there. You hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so obviously I was just saying that there was, the utility regulators briefing was very concerning in terms of the continuing cost of energy rising, and if members would be content that we would seek to, we have the utility regulator and the Consumer Council coming into us on the 3rd of November, so if members are content that we would note the briefing for now, and obviously we can pick those issues up with the utility regulator and the Consumer Council in more detail when they come before committee.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on then to 3.4, page 158 of our table papers, there's a clerk's memo providing an update following the informal meeting with Ballantyne Building Solutions on the 30th of September and a subsequent site visit by the clerk. At page 161 in table papers, there's a presentation showing the ICF system in practice during the building of a block of apartments in Lisburn. at page 185, table department for making changes to
Chair, we're losing your sound.
the informal meeting. Can you hear me, Peter?
Yep, I can hear you now. Yep.
So just to say, it would be very unusual for the committee to endorse a product. The informal meeting had been within the context of the committee's discussions around energy savings and efficiency in buildings as part of the energy strategy. So Peter, do you maybe want to speak to that particular item?
Yeah, Chair, this is, I guess, my moment to shine. So I have an example. Hopefully we can get this on camera. So it's essentially like a giant polystyrene. I hope members can see this okay. It's like a giant polystyrene Lego block. I'm going to go with non-technical terminology here. So essentially these are used one on top of the other. The polystyrene is obviously insulating, but if you look, there's a gap, a predetermined gap using these plastic dividers in the middle. That's poured with concrete, so this effectively will become a wall. It's half the time to build, probably a third cheaper, and obviously has much greater insulating powers because of the polystyrene around the outside, which is from recycled material, as are the plastic dividers. And as I say, they can be increased or decreased in width to give you a thicker or thinner concrete wall within. So really the issue was to try and bring this to the general attention of ministers, builders and so on generally. I'm going to return to my chair. This will be available for members to ponder on in the office at any time. So Chair, the idea is that this will be a much greater way to save energy. It's as you'd said, it's part of the committee's discussion around how to get immediate improvements around new builds and building regulations. And as you'd flagged up, Department for Finance has just put out a consultation on changing building regulations around conservation of heat and power, and that's part of what this system's key unique selling point, I suppose, is. So there are some suggestions there, and I'm more than happy if members want to email any technical questions, which I will forward to the company, because I've seen it and I can describe it, but obviously I don't have the science behind it. So as I say, they are very keen to bring it to attention, to profile it. And as you pointed out, we would very rarely endorse a product, but just in the context of where the committee's been in its discussions around energy saving, now would seem an appropriate time for a greater awareness of this kind of material. My understanding is that builders tend to like to build the way they've always built. There's a tendency towards keeping those traditions, keeping building the same way, but it's no longer as energy efficient as obviously we would need it to be in terms of moving to a zero carbon footprint and so on. So the idea is that if this product is more widely used, the Canadian company potentially might look to build a facility to produce here, or have it built under license here, which again would reduce the carbon footprint a bit further. So I'll as I say, take any questions that are technical and whatever and feed them back to the company. Chair, if you want to pick up on any actions. Chair? Chair? Chair, are you still there? I think we may have a problem. So if I could ask the Deputy Chair potentially to step in, I'm hoping you have a chair's brief to hand.
Yeah, I have.
So
Here, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yeah, we can hear you. If you
Okay,
want to step in there, the last para on page 3.
Okay, and just on the ICF as well, I joined that meeting and was very impressed with Keith who also joined that meeting, and he seemed to understand all the technical details that the construction team were talking about. So it was pretty impressive. But again, as I say, the experts were able to share actually that some of the technical sites that we're using here to build our houses are pretty out of date, even in other parts of the UK, which was actually quite interesting to me as well. There was more insulation required elsewhere. But as I say, Keith was extremely impressive at the meeting, asking the details of it. So at this point, we're just going to highlight the Introspect ICF system to the economy and Communities and Finance Minister, as well as Invest NI, if members are okay with that.
Thank you.
Okay, in relation to now item 4, parental bereavement leave and pay bill, the point 41, you will find a copy of correspondence from the Minister regarding the bill and response to the table of queries raised in page 33. Point 42 is a summary of amendment issues at page 58. Point 43 is the admissibility criteria for amendments at page 64. Point 44 is a copy of the Hansard of the Departmental briefing on the bill from the 6th of October meeting at page 65. Points 4-5 is a copy of the Hansard from the committee deliberations on the bill from last week, the 6th of October meeting at page 71, and point 4.6 is the clerk's memo outlining options for amendments to the bill at page 230 of the table papers. Members, you will remember at last week's meeting, the committee agreed to return to the potential amendments to the bill with respect to 3 specific issues. And they were the amendment of the bill to include provision for miscarriage, amendment of the bill to include pay from day 1 of employment rather than having to qualify a qualifying period of 26 weeks, and thirdly, the amendment of the bill to allow for leave to be taken in single days rather than blocks of at least a week. The majority of the respondees appear to be content with the arrangements as drafted. If any members would like maybe to add anything to that, that's fine. And can I ask Peter, the clerk, to provide an outline of the options in relation to the potential amendments of this bill? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. If members want to go to page 231 on their table pack, I've given you there a multicoloured options grid. Please do not be afraid. A lot of those options are simply there because they are our options and not necessarily because the committee is likely to want to take them or has to take them or anything like that. So if I just give you a general outline first, and then members can begin discussion after that. So in terms of miscarriage, there's 10 options provided for in the paper. It wasn't specifically included as part of the committee's survey, although it came across in our options to change the bill, modify the bill, or add additional comments. And the idea is that any provision on miscarriage would likely be based on a declaration by the mother that a miscarriage has happened. So there are a number of options here, and I won't, as I say, bore you to death with doing the pros and cons. So your headline options are do nothing, leave the bill as it is, take no further action around that issue. Second option, make a recommendation in the bill itself, the bill report itself, where essentially the committee would say they have a desire to amend the bill or have the bill amended on a future date, or have a new bill include this provision. Members will recall that the department has already indicated, and the Minister has reiterated that they would be looking at including miscarriage in a future employment bill. So moving further down the options, I seem to have a slight problem with my screen. No, there it's fixed. Option 3, make an agreed amendment that's agreed by the committee through the department to include miscarriage in the full scope of the bill. That means all aspects of the bill would apply in miscarriage, as well as the 24 weeks to 18 years. And the further option as part of that is doing it in real time, i.e. it becomes part of the bill. Now, again, it's important to flag up that the Minister has indicated timescales would not allow a real-time amendment and inclusion of that in the bill. 4 is make an agreed amendment through the department, again in real time, but on the basis of the provision in New Zealand, which is 3 days leave not paid, or some variation of that. And then option 5 is make an agreed amendment through the department, including miscarriage in the full scope of the bill, but doing that in delayed time, i.e. the option that was raised at last week's meeting, where you would make the amendment and it would be subsequently put into law when the department had done appropriate consultation and due diligence. The department has flagged up that that would be their preference for any inclusion of miscarriage in legislation, that it would go through the process that the rest of the bill has gone through. So that would be miscarriage, full provisions and delayed time. I see the chair is back again. Number 6 is, again, an agreed amendment through the department on New Zealand terms or a variation of that, and again, delayed time, i.e. it's made as an amendment for the department to put into law and regulation at a future date once it has done all consultation and due diligence. Then we're moving into the options which are as a result of the department not making the amendment. So 7 is a committee amendment to have miscarriage in the full provisions of the bill, so all the provisions that are already there, and again real time, and as members are already aware, real time would mean the bill would probably be unlikely to pass as it is. 8, committee amendment on New Zealand terms or a variation thereof, again in real time. 9, make a committee amendment including miscarriage in the full scope of the bill, but a delayed time amendment, i.e. as before, the department is asked to take that away and go through process and put it into law at a future date. Again, 10, make the amendment on New Zealand terms with a delayed time, and again that would mean instructing the department to go away and make that arrangement in law following due diligence and consultation. So those are the amendment options, or options more generally, for miscarriage. I will move on to the day one issue. So the day one issue is basically at the minute, within the scope of the bill, there is leave from day one. There's no lie-in period or no qualifying period for leave. Whereas for pay, as is not an unusual case in law, there's a 26-week qualifying period. So the day one issue is essentially bringing the pay element into the same category as the leave element, i.e. it would come from day one. The department has corresponded on this and indicated that this would have a cost impact and a time impact and may well have an impact on other benefits. But if I go through the potential options, so there's the option to do nothing, leave the bill as it is. There's the option again to make a recommendation, which would be for the department to legislate on this at a future date, and that can be a recommendation coming out of the bill report. The third option is make an agreed amendment, i.e. agreed by the committee through the department, to include the day one provision in real time. And again, the real time issue is that the department would probably not be able to do that within the remainder of this mandate to get the bill through. 4, an agreed amendment through the department, including the one-day option in delayed time, i.e. the committee or the department brings forward an amendment indicating that they will bring this through in legislation at a future point. 5, if the department does not agree to make an amendment, then the committee could make an amendment in real time on day one, and again the real time issues apply. Or 6, the committee can make an amendment on the day one issue in delayed time. So those are the 6 options for the day one issue. The third issue is leave being taken in single days. Now I should flag up again at this point that over 80% of respondents to the committee's survey and call for evidence said they were content with the leave arrangements as they are, i.e. the 2 weeks taken in blocks of a week, and there were a variety of reasons given for that are in the annex to this paper in the pack, including that it's easier to plan around a block for an employer. Also, if an individual is only taking a day, there's a level of pressure for them to, well, sure, could you not just do a bit of the morning, or could you not just do a bit of the afternoon, and so on. So the clear block was seen as a much easier defensible period, much easier for everyone to plan around. However, we've brought forward options again on this because it's one of the issues that has been referenced. So number 1, as before, do nothing. 2, as before, make a recommendation in the bill report that an option like this is explored going forward. 3, an agreed amendment through the department in real time. Again, the real time issues apply. 4, make an agreed amendment to the department in delayed time, as has just been discussed before. 5, if the department isn't willing to take an amendment, make a committee amendment in real time, which again, real time issues apply. Or 6, make a committee amendment in delayed time. And I just restate that there is no pressure from our consultation to make any amendment to that part of the legislation. So members just maybe want to bear that in mind. So those are the options, or an overview of the options. If members have any issues they want to raise, or Chair, if you want to reassume and make any comment. Thank you, Deputy Chair. Hopefully the Chair can hear us. Chair? Or not? So, going back to the Deputy Chair. So if oh, no, the Chair is there. Chair, can you hear us? Chair, if you knock off the camera, we can't hear you. Can you hear us? Chair, can you hear us? I don't think the Chair can hear us. So if I go back to the Deputy Chair, are there any comments you would like to make for a start off, and then we can move to other members?
Well, thank you very much, Peter, for outlining that. They're pretty comprehensive, all of the options, and they require a great deal of study in that. I mean, I think it was widely felt at the meeting last week that we would have liked to include provisions for miscarriage. And certainly day one, the bill to include day one employment. But it's looking likely that the time is not on our side, and really those are the areas that we really need to consider whenever we're looking at all the various options and the pros and cons for each of them. But it's a pretty comprehensive paper from the department, and looking at them. So it's open for any other members now if they want to discuss the next steps.
Deputy Chair John has indicated there yet.
Sorry, and Peter may have covered this. What time scale has the committee got to consider its amendments moving forward?
So what we would do is hopefully today we would get to a point where the committee has a decision on what it might want to ask the department to make an amendment on. We would ask the department to bring back such an amendment next week. Simultaneously, the Bill Office will look at beginning a draft of such amendments that they will then have ready in case they're needed. We have a cut-off point on this bill of mid-November. So ideally, we really need to be going into at least informal clause by clause next week, which would include making final, or at least fairly final decisions around amendments. So the ideal is that today members would decide if there are particular options they want to move forward on, and that we would ask the department, if that's where members want to go, if they want to ask the department to make amendments, we would ideally like to be in a position to flag that up to them today, even if we don't have exact wording, for them to start work on, or at least indicate to the committee that they are not willing to take forward, or how they would want to take it forward, etc. So we don't have a great deal of time, I suppose, is the short answer.
Peter, can you hear me?
Yeah, Chair, we can
Yeah.
hear you again. We can hear you again.
Great. I don't know what the problem was there. It keeps putting me out of early this morning, so I'm not sure if there's a security issue or something. But I heard most of what you were saying, Peter, in relation to the options for amendments. And I guess from having a look at it, it would seem like the best way would be to have the delayed amendments, or if that's what we're calling them, the not in real time ones, to be taken through on the same basis as the bill. Is that what the department has indicated would be their preference?
The department has indicated its preference is to move forward with the bill as is, and then look at other issues to legislate on in a future employment bill. In terms of what the department would be willing to do or is able to do, that would be based on the committee making a decision of what it wants and asking the department if it can do it. You'll recall officials last week talked about the idea of delayed time, and they were talking about it specifically around the idea, the issue of miscarriage, and also of the day one, not the changing the blocks of leave, because, as I say, there's been no evidence for us that there is popular support for changing those week blocks of 2 weeks as a total. So the department has talked about how delayed amendments could be made. I suppose it's important to stress that that was not the department saying that was any kind of preference. As I say, the correspondence we've had, and I emailed a further response this morning around the delayed time issue, which is quasi-legal advice, so we can't disclose it, but members will have it. They have the email, so they can look at that. But essentially, it would be a case of asking the department if it was willing to make those delayed time amendments, if that was where the committee wanted to go, and then we would ask them to respond within the week on that. So that would be miscarriage and day one, rather than the blocks of leave changing into single days. Because as I said, I reiterate, we did not get evidence of support for that.
Okay. So the committee needs to make a decision now as to whether we would like to go forward with the miscarriage and the day one rights in delayed time.
Chair, yeah, absolutely. It might be easy as well just to eliminate options that the committee doesn't want to consider. So, for example, for each, there's a do nothing, and if we look at that for miscarriage, if there's an appetite to do nothing, if there's any members are wanting to indicate that they are content to do nothing. I appreciate this is very live and pressurised. It's really coming down to timescale. We don't have a huge amount of time, and if there is a desire to amend or change, then that needs to be looked at. What I might suggest is that obviously we can ask the department to do these things. There is no requirement for a final decision. That will come ultimately once the committee has seen what the department is willing to do. So if you wanted to move forward today on the basis of consensus rather than getting into any form of voting, then the committee, when there are more people here and more people in the room, may then want to move to the basis of making decisions potentially through voting. So if today there was an ability to move forward with consensus, and Chair, it might be helpful for me to suggest where consensus may be from observation, and obviously I'm more than willing to be told no, that is not the case at any point, and please do interrupt and do that. So the suggestion I'm getting on miscarriage is there is a consensus to see if the department can make an amendment in delayed time, and a decision on that would not be made today, that is asking the department to do that and asking the department to show how it would do that, with the committee making a decision subsequently. Would I be right in thinking there's consensus to move forward and do that?
Certainly, I would be in support of that, Peter.
And that would be miscarriage as full part of the bill on the same terms as the 24 weeks to 18 years. Okay. And
Can I ask, Chair, what is the exact timescale? You know, this decision-making process now. You know, we're asking the Bill Office to commence more work on this area. Is that up till next week, or what?
Chair, if I can respond to that, we essentially have today, next week. We have no week, obviously, in recess, so by next week we need to be at a point where we are at least doing informal clause by clause, and that would require to know what sort of amendments are possible and that the committee might want to make. Then, following recess week, we have essentially 2 weeks to go through and finalise formal clause by clause and approve a bill report. The bill report must be complete in advance of Monday, the 15th of November.
Right, okay.
So our process essentially is now we're at a stage where every week sort of counts. And again, I apologise, this is the pressure of time, largely because of the rapidly approaching end of the mandate, and the need that the department has stated to get the bill through in a time scale that will allow them to make the regulations that will allow the bill to be operational by the start of the next financial year, April 2022. So that, and I appreciate it's very difficult, and especially when we are doing this in a hybrid way with some people here and some people not here, that makes it incredibly difficult. But essentially, the ideal today would be being able to be moving forward with some level of decision. However, I appreciate members may want to have more time for thought, and the important thing here is trying to move forward with consensus and do things right. So what I might suggest is members take this away, give it further consideration, and we find a way to essentially carve out time next week to do this when we're likely to have more, if not all, members in attendance. I am very conscious of the fact that we have 3 members not here, and this is a really key decision to be making. And I also appreciate that the options table is very extensive and members have not had long to look at it. Plus, members may want to take time to consider what came through from the department this morning. Yeah. So I think what I'm feeling is that maybe we need to give members time to look at this and come back to it, and we will work out a way to do that efficiently next week. Chair, the Deputy Chair has a...
Yeah, go ahead, Sinead.
I suppose I'm probably expressing what everybody at the meeting is expressing. You know, there's a desire to make good law and good legislation, and I hate the fact that I feel so rushed in this particular process, because we know if we just let it go through as it was, that it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. And you know, a lot of young women and young parents that are experiencing dreadful loss will not be adequately served through the content of this bill. And I suppose I'm reluctant to call out preferences of options until I absolutely know that the Bill Office can proceed with the better parts of the bill that we've already suggested, within this mandate. And I do know time is not on our side. So I suppose that there is that reluctance around the table, and I can hear it, in the silence, because people are unwilling to kind of push through something that they know is not just adequate for the purposes in which we all envisaged in it. And that's just where I'm coming from. And I suppose maybe I nearly need more time even to talk it out and talk through it before I can call it, for want of a better word.
Peter, sorry, can I just come in?
Yep, go ahead, Chair.
But asking the department if they would be willing to make the amendments in no way holds up the progress of the bill as it stands.
It doesn't. What really the crucial issue is making a decision as to what amendments you would want to make, and whether the department then would be willing to make those amendments. I think that would have been the ideal today, but I think members would be very uncomfortable, and I think I'd be uncomfortable moving forward until members have had an opportunity to discuss this at greater length.
Chair, I think it's also fair.
Okay.
It's also fair to say that whatever the department decide to do, and indeed whatever this committee decides to do, when the bill comes back to the floor of the Assembly, individual members may also wish to make amendments to the bill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, I suppose, is an option that could have gone down but didn't, in terms of any individual member, as always, is in a position to bring an amendment to the bill, and that there is no requirement for them to hold back. The committee has a number of processes it must go through, whereas an individual member is not bound by that as not being part of the committee. But I think, Chair, if members are content, what we'll do is members now have the options. If they want to take them away, talk to each other, and we will find a way to make the time to get this done appropriately. And we'll talk to members further about how we will do that. But if members want to take this away for now, consider it and talk to each other, talk to their parties, however they want to approach that. And then we will bring it back, and with it we will bring a plan to bring our timetable back on track appropriately. But essentially what ideally we would be wanting to be in a position to do next week is make a decision as to what the committee wants to ask the department to do, if anything.
Okay,
So
Peter.
if I can ask members to kind of be in a position maybe to come back with that as a thought next week. Okay? Yeah. Okay, Chair.
Okay.
We don't have our witnesses for the next briefing yet because we're running slightly early. So our options are then to move to item 7, or potentially, if Mr. O'Dowd wished, we could go to item 6, which is his small-scale green energy bill, if Mr. O'Dowd's content to speak on that now.
If the chair and the committee is content, I'm looking to go ahead now, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
go ahead, John.
Chair, just to say officially that as the sponsor of the bill, when Mr. O'Dowd is dealing with the bill, he is the sponsor, but once he steps out of that role, he is back as a normal member of committee again. So it's just, members need to remember there's 2 roles. Sorry, Mr. O'Dowd, go on ahead.
Okay, so if it suits the chair and the committee, I know if all the members were either at the debate or involved in the debate on the Assembly floor in terms of second stage of the bill, but I thought it would be useful just to give a brief overview of the purpose of the bill again and go through each clause for members, and also who's listening in to the committee today who may have an interest in this piece of legislation. So if that suits, that's how I plan procedure. Okay, as members will be aware, and particularly those who attended the utility briefing last week, we are facing a significant rise in energy prices over the next number of months. Some of that is driven by world energy costs, reliance on fossil fuels, and even in terms of some of the larger green energy providers not being able to sustain their delivery to the network over a summer which has seen very, very little wind power on land for that period. Now, I'm not suggesting that this bill will resolve our energy crisis, but I think it will play a part in certainly greening our energy grid, democratising the delivery of energy, because we will be supporting those who are energy users to become energy producers and sell back into the network moving forward. The executive previously set a target of achieving 40% of electricity consumption from renewable sources by 2020. As the committee members will know, the Department for the Economy is currently developing an Energy Strategy 2050, which is hopefully to be published by the end of this year. The Committee on Climate Change in 2019, Reducing Emissions in NI, stated that they believe that there needs to be a supplier obligation and feed-in system. I believe a legislative intervention is necessary to rapidly grow the share of renewables on the grid. One way of doing this is to expand the share of micro-generated renewable energy. Currently, the energy market has evidently failed to provide sufficient price incentives for homes, businesses and farms to switch to micro-generation systems. The removal of the narrow and other renewable obligations has produced a stagnant community energy sector. My bill is intended to be a first step in reversing that trend. It will incentivise the growth of micro-renewable energy generation in homes, farms and businesses by creating a minimum tariff that major suppliers must pay for power generated from such sources. It will also place an obligation on major suppliers to source at least 5% of their total electricity supply from microgeneration. Climate experts around the world are agreeing that microgeneration must play a role in the decarbonisation of our planet. Indeed, in their 2019 report, the Climate Committee specifically recommended a supplier obligation feed system for the North. Not only can the growth of renewable microgeneration help us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it can create additional income for families and communities and help reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, which, as we've seen over those last few months, are prone to erratic and extreme swings in costs, which place additional and unexpected burdens on already struggling families. Moving to the clauses of my bill. Clause 1 of the bill establishes a small-scale green energy scheme. It lays out the main goals of the scheme: the provision of a minimum price tariff for micro-generated renewable power exported to the electricity grid, and a requirement on major electricity providers to source at least 5% of their electricity from micro-generated renewables. It also sets a number of definitions for the terms used in the bill, such as micro-generated and renewable power. A micro-generator is defined as a renewable generator with a maximum generation capacity of 50 kilowatts. This is a standard definition in many countries introducing micro-generation legislation, including Britain and the rest of Ireland. A major provider has been defined as any provider with a market share of 5% or above. This takes in all providers here, with the exception of Click Energy, who currently have 3.4% market share. When I carried out a consultation on the draft bill, more than twice as many responses favoured a 5% definition to a 3%. Clause 2 sets out supplementary regulations for the scheme, as well as setting a list of stakeholders who must be consulted when regulations are being set, while Clause 3 commits the Department to reviewing the scheme as and when economic conditions change. Clause 4 outlines the rules for suspension of the scheme, while Clause 5 outlines the guidance the Department may give in relation to the operation of the scheme and its goals. Clause 6 sets out the meaning of specific words and phrases used in the bill. Clause 7 sets out the timeline for when it must come into operation, and Clause 8 confirms its short title as a small-scale green energy bill. And as I said previously, I'm aware many of the members were involved in the debate and are familiar with the bill's content, so therefore I'm happy to end my presentation on that and answer any questions from members. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, John. It was really useful to get the overview again. And I guess, as you've set out yourself, the context that we're discussing this in is the increase in costs and fluctuations in the prices of fossil fuels. And I guess while none of us expect the move to renewables will happen overnight, or that this bill is going to solve all the problems for consumers in the here and now, it's really important that we do begin to make progress in terms of the move to renewables. I guess just to ask John, there was a couple of issues raised over the course of the debate, and you responded to them yourself at the time, but there were two legislative issues in particular, one in relation to, I think it was the electricity directive, and then the other was in relation to state aid. And I was just wondering if you have anything that you would like to say in respect of those particular issues.
Well, as I said during the debate, I don't claim to be an expert on state aid rules, but I do think there's an opportunity for the committee to bring in those who are experts on state aid rules to see if this bill will be in conflict with it. My personal view is that it won't be, because one, we are not supporting one company over another or giving advantage to one company over another. All companies have to operate under the same mechanisms. There is no funding packages within my bill. So any future scheme the Minister brings forward may contain incentives for providers to come forward, but my bill is not legislating for that. And in terms of the electricity directive, again, I think we should ask for the power providers to be brought in and experts on the directive to be brought in to discuss that issue. But again, I don't believe the bill will be in breach of that, because all providers, again, are being treated equally.
Yeah, I guess coming out of today's briefing, Peter, we could ask for those particular things to be addressed by the department or whoever that is most appropriate to respond to them, if that is something that members would be agreeable to. And then I guess, John, one of the other issues that was brought up by a number of members, and it was discussed by ourselves at the briefing with the energy officials a couple of weeks ago, was the issue of the cost of connection to the grid. And it was just, if you have anything you maybe would like to address in terms of that.
Again, my bill doesn't directly refer to any cost connections, but as a consequence of microgeneration, there will be cost connections. I think that, I don't know if this bill, the scope of this bill will allow us to tackle that through this piece of legislation, but I do believe it's something that needs to be challenged. The costs of whether it's microgeneration, and some members refer to industry coming in, and the cost of connections to the grid are, in my opinion, extreme and need to be challenged, or certainly justified by NI Power, who have a monopoly on these matters. So I think it's a useful part of the discussion around the bill. I don't know, and maybe members or the committee may come to the conclusion that there needs to be an amendment to my bill to chat or to cover that matter, but I think it certainly forms part of the discussion.
Okay, thanks for that, John. Stuart's looking to come in for a question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And my question really has just been answered, because it was around the aspect of just how this bill will fit in with the ability to connect to the network, because speaking to a number of turbine cooperatives, that's been one of the biggest difficulties that they have. Also, location in very rural areas where you're likely to get more turbines is difficult for grid connection, and it is an issue that needs to be tackled. I appreciate that it's not necessarily part of this bill, but if the bill is to achieve its full potential, then it's an issue which needs to be resolved and resolved as soon as possible. And just, Chair, it's very important that we're discussing this bill today and the advantages that it will deliver for Northern Ireland in the light of the appalling decision to allow a marine construction licence by DERA today for the gas cavern project in Island McGee for fossil fuels, which nobody wants any longer.
Yeah, I agree, Stuart, and we've all seen, I guess, the impact of being reliant on fossil fuels only too well over the past couple of weeks and likely into the rest of the winter, so that is very concerning that has been granted today. Peter, I wonder, is it Go ahead, sorry,
Chair, just
go ahead.
Can I ask John just what concerns he has about grid connection, and does he feel that that might stifle or hold back the full purpose of his bill?
Well, sure. I think there is genuine questions to be asked about the cost of connections and how that cost is met either by the subscriber or the provider. And during the debate, one instance was referred to that a company may come into a field and build a new plant and cost maybe £85,000 for connections to the grid. And regardless of what type of energy they're using, it doesn't have to be green energy, it doesn't have to be micro generation, whatever the connection, around £85,000. Another company can arrive into the same field, hopefully a brownfield site, and build a factory, but they won't be charged for that connection. So where is the fairness in the system, and how can we ensure that, one, there's fairness in the system, and in terms of this bill, that micro generation is not stifled because of very, very expensive connections to the grid. So I think that is a challenge moving forward. It may be, in fact, in terms of if the bill passes and gets passed through its final stages of the Assembly, it's certainly something the scheme which the Minister will be tasked to bring forward and goes up with the bill, I think we'll have to look at, and how we incentivise the connections, or how we incentivise micro green energy, and it's not stifled by very high connection costs to the grid.
Thank you.
Thanks, John and Stuart. Peter, I wonder, is it, or would it be useful, even as part of our discussions around the energy strategy, to have NIE into committee at some point in the near future to discuss this and other issues?
Chair, we can do that. We seek to schedule that in as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you. No one else has indicated any questions, so just, yeah.
Chair, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John, for your presentation. One of the issues that was mentioned during the debate was in and around the issue of those living in certain social housing complexes or tower blocks. I'd appreciate if you just get a wee update on that in terms of, the issues around that there's a feeling that they would have to bear some of the cost, and it would be disproportionate and they wouldn't get the benefits of it. So I'd appreciate just any more thoughts on that, John, if possible, please.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Currently around 3.8% of energy provided to the grid is from micro generation. My bill has the target of increasing that to 5%, or certainly the providers will buy 5% of their energy from micro generation. So we're talking about a 1.2% increase, which is marginal in terms of overall production. So currently, the major providers have to buy their electricity from somewhere, so they're paying for that electricity from another source at this stage. So I want them to increase that by 1.2% to the overall grid. So that's a very, very minimal increase, which when you spread that across the entire grid is going to be minimal in terms of any price impact, if any, on consumers. So those who are not, for instance, you mentioned living in social housing or living in a community which won't be able to either invest in or install micro generators, why should they pay for somebody else having a micro generator? If there is going to be a cost, it's going to be minimal, and it may be neutral due to the fact that the electricity providers already have to buy electricity, and I'm looking at a 1.2% increase. But again, my bill sets up the scheme ask the Minister to bring forward a scheme. I think as part of that scheme, the Minister, or a future Minister, regardless of what political party that Minister comes from, is going to have to take a look at these issues of how we support those on lower incomes and ensure that those on lower incomes are not facing the worst of the cost hike that are facing broader society at this time.
Yeah, thank you, John, and certainly it is timely, given obviously energy cost rises that we've had and that are unfortunately going to come down the line, unfortunately for all of us. Just in terms of the, and this was something that I mentioned during the debate on the bill's explanatory and financial memorandum, the line was included in it that it was difficult to project demand for the scheme due to the setup. Again, as I said in the debate, that concerns me slightly. Just in terms of consultation that you've done to date, You know, is there the demand for what you're trying to do?
There's certainly a recognised need for microgeneration to be part of our battle against carbon emission and climate change. And I reference a number of reports in my presentation today, and also in terms of my presentation in the Assembly, where those who are looking at these matters says that there has to be microgeneration as part of tackling greenhouse gas emissions and providing democracy of energy to the grid. So yes, I do believe there's a need for it, but the problem has been that in the absence of any support or legislative directive on providers, then microgeneration has fallen away. The NIRO scheme, which is no longer with us, has meant that there is no meaningful support in place or legislative pressure on the providers to provide microgreen energy. For instance, I was talking to someone yesterday evening who has a major production plant with significant square footage of roof. And over this last number of years, he's been seeking to see if he could put solar power panels on top of the roof. But there's nothing there to incentivise either him to put them on or for the major providers to be buying green energy. So I think it's not simply a case of build it and they will come. There's a demand out there which is not being met because there's no legislative incentive or direction on anyone to make it happen.
Thank you. And obviously, the energy strategy, we look forward to that being published very soon. You know, and obviously that will have a key focus on affordability and tackling ultimately fuel poverty and so on. So thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Sinead's looking to come in there for a question, John.
You've actually almost answered it, John, in your last answer. Thank you very much for your presentation, by the way. I suppose it's around incentives, and we have seen here in Northern Ireland some of the perverse incentives that we've had around renewable energy. So there's a bit of caution in all of us in and around that, but there still has to be some form of incentive in order to support people who are looking to create new green energy. And I was just wondering, have you looked at best practices in relation to placing incentives on building these small micro schemes, and what is the research showing you? What type of incentives are best to help support communities as they try and tackle this?
My bill doesn't directly instruct the department to bring an incentive, but does instruct the department to bring forward a scheme to have 5% of energy delivered to the grid from small or from micro generation. So I don't delve into the area of financial incentives, but I think the fact that a provider will be given a fixed price for the electricity they produce and they sell back to the grid will be an incentive in itself for more people to have micro generation as part of either their farm, their home, their business, wherever it is, moving forward. If the Minister brings forward a scheme which includes incentives, then I think there's a responsibility on the Minister to look at how that scheme or to how that incentive should be financed and what is the best models around the globe in relation to that. But you're right, we have had our fingers burnt here in terms of incentives. There is clause 4 within my bill, which allows for any such scheme to be revoked if it is found to have unintended consequences. So there is a safety net built into this bill for any future scheme which would include a grant. But my current legislation doesn't say that the Minister has to have a financial incentive for the scheme.
Yeah, and I think that, we have, there's good lessons and bad lessons in and around incentives as well. We've had the very perverse situation where, landlords or landowners were paying them large amounts of money to produce smaller wind turbines rather than larger turbines, like through rocks and everything else. But so we have to get that right. And I know the bill doesn't specifically deal with that, but obviously, if we want to increase the provision, there is, there's incentives, and it doesn't always have to be about monetary incentives as well, but we need to make sure that we build a robust system that and has got checks in place in order to make sure that that it's not been abused at any point. Thank you.
So even if you look at the most recent PAC report into the narrow scheme, I think it was a good report because it didn't go down. There was a lot of media criticism of the narrow scheme, which I think went a wee bit overboard. But the PAC report and the audit report is a much more forensic examination of the issues surrounding that. So yes, there's lessons to be learned of the mistakes that were made, but also what was done right in the past. But I suppose we've made enough mistakes to learn from in terms of moving forward. That's if there's any advantage. But the point's well made. We have to take best practice model. I think it was Steve Aiken referred to the Danish model, the advancements that have been made in the Danish model, particularly in relation to microgeneration and connections to the grid as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, John.
And section 8, hold on, I think Claire might be looking. Yep, Claire's looking to come in there, John.
Thanks, Chair. John, recently someone had talked to me about planning and building regulations, potentially in terms of Northern Ireland and how we seem to be behind even other parts of GB and Ireland in relation to that. Does your bill kind of look to other infrastructures to kind of facilitate what you're trying to do? And or does it almost put that burden onto the department to do that? Because maybe I'm speaking out of context, I'm not sure.
Well, my bill does A, B, C, D. The department, they'll have to be E, F, G, H moving forward. Though I do note the Department for Finance has issued a consultation, and Peter referred to it when he was doing his QVC display earlier on in terms of selling the blocks. He referred to that as well. So look, my bill doesn't cover that area, but I think it's an interesting dynamic because if we are moving to a future where obviously the best form of energy conservation is insulation and ensuring people don't have to use energy to heat their homes, so that's the best way forward. But when I seen the publication of the DFP report, I was thinking to myself, is there something in that in terms of moving forward with microgeneration and how future construction can build this in rather than it being an addition to a property moving forward? So it's something I have an eye on, but I don't think this bill it's necessary to cover it in this bill.
Yeah, okay. No, look, thank you. I do think it needs to be something that needs to look like more widely, because I suppose in terms of incentives and opportunities in relation to this, it can't happen if the infrastructure's not there, particularly if it is in and around building regs. And I understand that Northern Ireland might be the only region of the UK that doesn't have it. So, I think if we're going to try and move forward in this sort of green way, then it's something we need to look at. So no, I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. John, I don't have anybody else indicating for questions, but in our pack there's a number of things that Peter would like us to sign off on. There are survey questions at page 239 of table papers. The clerk is in the process of writing out to key stakeholders to seek their views, and the survey questions will be part of the committee's wider public consultation that will be carried out on citizen space. So if members are content with the survey questions, or if there's anything that members would like to additionally ask or amend or whatever, I'm sure Peter would be happy to take that on board in terms of if anyone wants to get in touch with him. Peter, is there anything you maybe want to add?
No, Chair, the questions are roughed out there, and we have a notice that will go in the press once we get clearance on it. So we would hope to have all of that in place theoretically by the end of the week. We've already drafted letters to go out to stakeholders, and that's in the process of going out, just asking for their views on the bill. So we have that triple approach: a call for evidence, a survey, and we've targeted specific stakeholders directly. So if members are content with all those actions, we'll proceed as outlined.
Yep, and the media notice is very straightforward, so it could definitely be signed off if members are content. And if anybody does have any views around the questions, they look okay to me. So,
If there's any suggestions, members can let me know. We wouldn't be going out with those on the citizen space before Friday anyway. So what I'll do is, if we make any further amendments on advice from research, we recirculate to members for approval. So they'll be circulated again for approval before they go out, okay?
that's great, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm just looking at here the other actions. There's no delegated powers, just to advise members in relation to this bill. The bill will still need to be referred to the examiner statutory rules for advice in relation to delegated powers. So if members are content that we would write to the examiner statutory rules requesting a report on the delegated powers within the small scale green energy bill.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I have tidied everything off there, Peter. Yeah.
Yep, that's everything covered, Chair. If you want to go back to 5, our officials are here.
That's great, and thanks to John for his presentation. So we're going back to item number 5, excuse me, which is the departmental briefing on the skills strategy. There's a clerk's memo at page 74, a departmental briefing paper at page 80, a copy of the Skills Advisory Group's briefing papers from the meeting on the 6th of October at page 119, and a copy of the committee's micro-inquiry skills report at page 126. So I'd welcome to the meeting this morning Heather Cousins, who's Deputy Secretary of Skills and Education Group in DFE, Graham Wilkinson, who's Director of Skills Division, and Roger Arnold, who is Skills Strategy Branch. So I hand over to yourself to make an opening statement, and then we can open it up to members for questions.
Good morning, and firstly I'd like to thank members of the committee for the opportunity to engage with you on the key outcomes from the consultation on the new skills strategy, Skills for a 10x Economy. Members may recall the briefing Graham and I provided before the consultation launched, which summarised the key themes the department proposed and the substantial programme of research and stakeholder engagement which supported the development of our proposed strategy. Minister Dodds launched a 12-week consultation on the 26th of May, with the period concluding on the 19th of August. The consultation page received almost 3,000 unique views, and the full consultation document was downloaded just over 1,500 times. In addition, the department hosted 2 remote consultation events with a total of 260 people registering, and these were supported by a number of engagements with individual organisations as requested. In terms of formal responses to the consultation, 112 were received from a broad range of individuals and organisations. As members will have noted from the briefing packs provided, all aspects of the strategy were positively endorsed by a majority of respondents. Whilst responses varied across the specific questions asked, there were some overarching themes of feedback which we are working to incorporate more fully across the whole strategy. I'll concentrate on those in my opening remarks, but we'll be happy to explore any other issues in more detail as members wish. Firstly, the majority of respondents agree with the proposals put forward on supporting economic growth. Some concerns have been raised, however, on the specific measures we will put in place to support greater inclusion in education and labour market opportunities. In particular, this has been with reference to gender equality, building a better understanding of the particular challenges faced by people with disabilities, and the challenges that confront young people who have not reached their potential for a variety of reasons. A key concern highlighted in this area is the forthcoming withdrawal of ESF funding and how we continue to deliver education and skills provision through third sector organisations. There is a need to recognise the vital role that the third sector plays outside the formal education system in connecting people with viable education and career pathways. The second issue is not unrelated to the point made previously on gender. There has been significant feedback on the prevalence of unpaid care in Northern Ireland and how that affects women's capacity as the primary providers of care to participate in education and labour market opportunities. Whilst this incorporates some recommendations around improving skills, much of this work will need to be addressed on a cross-departmental basis recognising and working collaboratively to address the areas where various aspects of social policy interface with access to education and labour market opportunities. Thirdly, climate change did feature as a key strategic issue in our consultation document, but feedback suggests there is a need to be more explicit about what it means for the skills system, both in the context of how likely it is to change jobs and skills demand, and how it can create opportunities for employment and reskilling, opportunities that Northern Ireland is well positioned to take advantage of if we act quickly. We are currently working closely with colleagues who are developing the Executive's energy strategy to explore this aspect more fully. And finally, the policy enablers we proposed focused on investment in the skills system and joined up working across government stakeholders. The proposals contained in this section were welcomed, particularly the creation of the Northern Ireland Skills Council and the need to invest in skills. There is broad recognition that a step change is required in the approach to joined up government, including in how the system is funded if meaningful change is to be achieved. This will be essential to delivering on our economic potential and ensuring positive societal and environmental outcomes. With regard to next steps, some key areas of further development are underway. Firstly, we're working on a redraft of the strategy, maintaining the same structure and objectives, but working across government to develop responses to the key consultation messages I have covered. Secondly, we're setting out key priorities for the first 2 years so we can continue to build on our post-COVID recovery, whilst ensuring we establish a sound base to move towards our long-term strategic objectives. Thirdly, we are developing financial estimates of what it will take to deliver the strategy. Members will have noted the extensive programme of work set out, and we believe that this is a vital programme of activity to modernise our skills system in a way that will support our economic ambition and provide opportunities for everyone to reach their potential. The strategic investment in the system will be required. Collaborative work across government is key. The draft strategy took in a broad sweep of education, skills, employability and economic policy, but consultation responses have been clear on the need to better recognise and address the interface between skills and social policy. To conclude, members will be aware of our engagement with key stakeholders in business, trade unions and education institutions as we develop the strategy. Such a collaborative approach has been vital to getting to this stage and is something we are committed to in the long term. In that regard, the Minister has now agreed to the establishment of an interim Northern Ireland Skills Council, which will formalise this ongoing process of co-design. I thank you for your time this morning, and we certainly welcome any questions you may have.
And thanks very much, Heather, and thanks for the update as well. And I very much welcome the briefing paper that you have provided and the briefing this morning, and the themes that you have highlighted that has come out of the consultation. I know some of them align with some of our own responses as a party to the skills strategy, which we welcomed as very comprehensive, and clearly the work that has been done over the past couple of years in informing it has been very beneficial. And I do welcome that recognition, as you've highlighted, about the interface between social policy and skills, and you know, the whole I guess ecosystem around removing barriers to education and skills as a way to improve equality on the grander scheme of things. So excuse me, I'm a bit hoarse today. So there's a couple of questions I did want to pick up with you on. And one, I suppose, is that you highlighted in relation to the loss of ESF funding, which is a big concern for us, particularly in respect of those third sector organisations. Has there been any further information or progress in relation to the Shared Prosperity Fund that you're able to share with us, or how do you see that gap being filled in the time ahead? And I know that we have been engaging with, for example, Include Youth around some of their programmes that are aimed at young people leaving care and young people who are further away from training and education. and around putting in place some core funding for their programs. Is that something that you've had any further engagement with them around as well?
If I could unpack that into two parts, really. I don't really have any up-to-date information on the Shared Prosperity Fund. As you know, that is being managed centrally by Whitehall Department, and we have had very little to do with that. And also, ESF is not managed through the Skills and Education group, rather that's a different group in our department. So we've only, I suppose, seen questions and correspondence going through on this issue. However, we were involved at the beginning in trying to look at what a successor programme might look at. However, we know that budgets are going to be difficult, and really we had to set that project aside because we didn't have any funding to take that forward. I think we need to see what comes out of the successor to ESF managed by MCLG or whatever their name is now, to see what the gaps are going to be. And also, we will be going out with a programme on level 0, level 1 in the future. And I think that will be an opportunity for the third sector to be involved in providing the programmes at that level. It will probably be a mixed economy, but certainly, I think that there are vast amounts of skills within the third sector to be able to provide what's required at that level, which will include mentoring and other sorts of support and reaching those that are hardest to reach. So I think that's the way I see that happening in the future. Also, we have substantial monies coming to us over the next number of years through Peace 4 or Peace Plus, I can't remember what it's called. And Graham can maybe say a bit more about that. And again, we would hope that that would pick up some of the gap. Unfortunately, we have also not got funding to be able to fill that gap between one programme ending and another programme beginning. And that's just the position that we find ourselves in. So Graham, do you want to add to what I've said?
I think it's very comprehensive, Heather. Just a couple of points. I suppose it was a positive that we secured additional funding for the current ESF programme, so that takes it out to March 2023. Our current understanding with the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is members will be aware of the Community Renewal Fund that is currently being delivered, but we understand that we'll get more details on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund later in October, later this month, so we await those details. But Heather's quite right in terms of Peace Plus. I mean, there's lots of opportunities within the Peace Plus programme. One of the measures that we're working on is specifically related to skills. So we're looking at €50 million over a 7-year time horizon. So I do agree, Chair, that the whole piece around funding is changing as the EU funding comes to an end. But I do see opportunity in other programmes. We're also working very closely with Departmental Communities in relation to their employability NI programme. And I think there's great opportunity within that and getting a deeper understanding of the needs at a local level. I think that's really important, and the labour market partnerships provide that fora for us to do that. So I think that's a good example of both departments working together, but actually getting a deeper understanding of the needs at a local level. So things are changing, but I think what we have created is a really useful ecosystem for us to get a deeper understanding of what the needs are at a community level and to utilise the funding wherever it might come from to actually meet those needs.
And thank you both for those responses. That's very helpful. See, in relation to Heather, you outlined setting some priorities for the first 2 years, and that you are currently in a further development and a redrafting phase of the strategy itself. What do you anticipate the time frame for that piece of work being? And there have been some very positive skills programs that have been put in place along with our third level providers over the past year in relation to the pandemic and supporting people reskill and upskill. Are there particular objectives or priorities that you see that can be rolled out even in advance of the strategy itself being finalised?
Well, I think one example of that would be the Skill Up Fund, where we have clearly linked those programmes from low levels through to master's programmes, linked to the 10x strategy. So the priority areas that have been identified in that, there are 7,000 places offered on that, fully funded, and I think that's an example of how we are progressing things in advance of actually having finalised the strategy. In terms of timelines, Graham, do you want to outline what the timeline might be going forward?
Yeah, I think we have, there's a comprehensive piece of work required looking at the sorts of issues that Heather has outlined in terms of her opening remarks, particularly around tying together social inclusion, the issues around childcare, around disability and gender. So ideally, we would like to take the next number of months to complete that redraft and to get that completed. So probably later on in this calendar year before we'll be in a position to publish it, I think. But just to re-emphasise the point that Heather is making, we're not waiting on the strategy to be published to actually get on with things. As Heather has said, we have an interim skills council, and those relationships are vitally important that we continue on with those and we maintain the momentum that we have already created. Even things like the digital spine, we're working very closely with business, with the Department of Education, and starting to shape out what that digital spine looks like and the implications for business, for our education providers. And as Heather said, our Skill Up programme has already proved to be very beneficial in helping thousands of individuals to reskill and upskill. So I think we are implementing a lot of the strategy already, but we are very keen to get it published. But we want to get it right, Chair. So addressing those issues that have clearly come out through the consultation process is vitally important for us. But I would say, one of the things that we are keen to ensure is that it's not cast in stone. We see it very much as a developing and evolving strategy, and something that will continue to develop over the course of 10 years. So we don't see it as being, as I say, cast in stone and it being a completed document.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, that it is something that can evolve and respond to the needs of, the economy and society over the longer term as well. Just one of the points I wanted to pick up on is in relation to the point around it being aligned with the 10x vision and the priority clusters, and just in relation to how that ties in then with skills barometer and some of the other sectors that perhaps are not included within those priority clusters. I'm thinking particularly maybe the more traditional trades in construction, and also the care sector, where obviously there are workforce demands as well, and how those things are going to be tied into what the proposals that are coming forward.
I think what I would say in response to that, and Graham might want to then add to that, to me, the clusters identified in the 10x strategy are the clusters where we will be able to see growth in our economy. We still need to do all the other things that we have done. We still need to ensure that there is that skills provision. So we're not abandoning all the traditional skills provision. That's still there and still vitally important to the economy. These clusters have just been identified as areas for growth.
I think that.
Do you want to ask anything on the skill, or add anything on the skills barometer link?
So he broke up there. Was that to me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The skills barometer was raised as a bit of an issue in the consultation responses in terms of some of the things it may miss, particularly looking at lower levels of education, and also that it hasn't been updated since before Brexit and coronavirus. So those issues are recognised. We're using it to set the framework and the strategic direction for the skills strategy, but it's not the be all and end all. And I think the work that we intend to undertake with the Skills Council and through that directly with business and education will be absolutely vital in informing both the priority clusters and the skills needs in all those other sectors so important to our economy.
Thanks for that. That's all my questions, Peter. Is there anyone indicating to you?
I have no indication, Chair.
Just, Peter.
Sorry. Yep.
Chair,
Mr.
thank you, Chair. And thank you.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you, folks, for the presentation. We had a meeting last week with the Skills Advisory Group, and one of the key themes that came around that was in terms of careers. I would just be interested to know, in terms of how you see the career service currently within schools. You know, it would be sort of one view would be held that, you know, it possibly could be improved. I think that's something that's come through in the reports here. So I'd appreciate if you could just touch upon that, please.
Yes, I think that the area of careers is going to be vital going forward to ensure that it is as good as it can be. And there's always room for improvement, so you have both careers education in schools, you have our careers service also meeting with individual pupils on a number of occasions. And apparently over COVID times, it has been interesting that parents have also been able to join in virtual meetings on careers, which is useful. So I think part of the issue for us is that the lack of information that's out there about potential careers and I suppose just attitudes, cultural attitudes to careers and what aspirations are. The general aspiration is for every young person to go to university. That's not necessarily correct for every young person, and they just need to know the wide variety of careers that might be available to them. So we're working again on a separate paper on careers for 10X, and we will be putting a paper to the Minister on that whole careers and skills for the workforce and all of that. And in the 14 to 19 strategy also we have recommendations on careers. That strategy is going through, well, the framework and the action plan are going through clearance within the two departments concerned, DE and ourselves, and we would hope that that will come out shortly for people to have a look at.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. Sinead is coming in, and then John. You're on mute, Sinead.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your briefing this morning. And as you will be aware, last week we had a briefing from the advisory group. And one of the key observations, I suppose, one of the key observations when they were looking at Ulster University's Economic Policy Centre, which indicated that, over the last decade, investment in education and skills had fallen significantly. And that had obviously played a significant role in our competitiveness within the global context. In your considerations, how are you going to deal with the poor investment strategy that we've had for the past 10 years in education, and how do we catch up in our failures of the past?
I think that this will be a key issue for the executive to look at. Over the last number of years, the budget for the Department for Employment and Learning, as it was then, was significantly cut. And therefore, that's why we've had this disinvestment in skills. And it meant that, for example, we couldn't do all age apprenticeships. We couldn't do public sector apprenticeships because we just didn't have the funding for that. And, it was not prioritised in terms of other priorities that the executive had. So we have pointed out very clearly that if we are serious about improving skills to improve our productivity for the economy, there will have to be rebalancing of that investment in skills. The strategy is meaningless if there isn't the funding to go with it.
And that's really my concern. It's the greatest concern that we have in all of this, because what we've got is a document on paper, and in order for it to have any form of life, it has to be invested on, and we can just see year on year, that the investment is going in one direction, and that's downwards, and it's having a real impact on people's lives. And then the other consideration that was discussed last week was, the importance of other policies in and around, education and skills and how it impacts on that and the barriers for people participating in it. For example, and I'll go into our childcare policy, Stephen already brought up, for example, he talked about the careers guidance and the policy around that. But childcare is a real significant factor in allowing people to participate actively within the economy and to grow their careers, and it particularly affects women. And then the third issue, which I'll always bring up, is the levelling up and the disparity of investments and skills in particular areas outside of the Greater Belfast region. So there's a lot in it, and a lot of money needs to be put to it. And if it doesn't, it really is just another glorified strategy on paper, great ambition, but it doesn't jump off and it doesn't become meaningful.
Yes, I mean, I agree that all of those areas that you've raised are vitally important. As I say, unfortunately, that's outside of our control. We will highlight what levels of investment would be required. We will highlight what the impacts would be if our current programmes are again significantly cut. So, as I say, that will be a discussion for the executive rather than for us. In terms of childcare, I think that's a very important issue. And there is DE and DOH have joint responsibility for a childcare strategy. We also sit on that programme board, particularly in relation to skills required for that childcare strategy. And so, we're very active in that. It hadn't met for a while, but it's meeting again next month. So, there will be more on that coming forward.
And I'm aware that there's a consultation out at the moment, and there's quite significant engagement happening at the moment, and it's to the fore of conversations out there. But we really we need tangible outcomes that will support everybody in our community level, and not just doesn't mean in a regional basis, but it also means in a gender basis as well. And there's a lot of work to be done in that aspect of levelling up.
I think Graham could maybe cover what our plans are in terms of regional provision and the partnership approach that's envisaged going forward.
Yeah, thanks. Just on the point around investment, one of the points I did want to make was over the course of the last 2 financial years, we have increased our investment in skills by £50 million. So that is a significant investment. And I think we're seeing the tangible benefits for our economy and from a societal point of view as well. So I do see the tide starting to turn and people actually recognising the great benefits that increasing individual skills can have. So that is starting to change. In relation to the partnership approach, as I said, we're working with the Department for Communities and the Labour Market Partnerships jointly with the councils and getting a deeper understanding of what those local needs are. And whenever you do that analysis, there is quite a disparity across even council areas and within council areas in terms of what those local needs are. So that is something that we are very much engaged in to get a deeper understanding of what those needs are, inform interventions at those local levels, and obviously our universities and colleges and indeed the voluntary community sector will have an important role to play in delivering on those interventions. So that is something that we're engaged in and something that we're very keen to ensure that we get that deeper understanding.
I suppose just finally, just a final observation really than anything else. I think collectively, with all the consultations that has taken place in our micro inquiry, etc., we all know what needs to be done, and we all know, the real life regional disparities in skills and education and how it holds back a competitive economy and how it holds back individuals and traps people in poverty. We know what needs to be done, and we know what the Minister needs to do. They just need to get on with it.
Thanks, Sinead. John, do you want to come in now?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation thus far. As the Chair said, there's definitely, in terms of the skills strategy, there is a lot to be lot of good in it and a lot of potential in it. There are challenges in it with it as well, and we're starting, I suspect, from a low level. I note the strategy refers to the OECD report on skills. However, it ignores the OECD evidence that shows that the North is one of the worst performers in terms of skills, and while the South is one of the best. We placed, so we're starting from a low level, but hopefully we will make good traction. Why is there no intentions as part of the skills strategy to move away from what's known as the English awarding bodies? Now, I don't care if they're French awarding bodies or German awarding bodies, but if they don't serve the needs of our local economy, why do we continue to use them? And why is there no intention to maximise cross-border student flows and skills provision? I'm particularly thinking along those border communities who can benefit either from students going south or students going north for the benefit of the local economies in and around those regions.
If I could deal with the issue of the awarding bodies, first of all, we are at the moment undertaking a review of the vocational qualifications landscape with a view to streamlining and simplifying, and we have been too dependent on the open market for awarding bodies. We just had a conversation yesterday with SIA to look at, well, what can we do going forward together? And if it is appropriate to do our own thing in Northern Ireland, if that turns out to be an option, we'll look at that. So that work has commenced. I have a new director of tertiary and post-16 education reform, and that's his first task, is to look at that whole area. So there'll be more on that coming forward in the future. And in terms of North-South, obviously the peace initiative, the funding that we talked about, that will be targeted at the border areas and working together. We have also had, conversations with the institutes of technology, or technological universities as they are going to be, on what can be done together. So again, we're not ignoring that. Also, as part of the consultation for the strategy, there was extensive engagement with equivalents down south, and that's reflected in some of our recommendations. The Skills Council, for example, National Skills Council, came directly from our engagement with colleagues in that department that we were talking to, which is now DeFerris.
Okay.
Do you want to add to that in terms of the peace monies in particular?
It is a point where we are engaging with our counterparts in Ireland around the Peace Plus programme and how that can benefit economically and socially across both jurisdictions. And as Heather said, there is learning around how the Irish government brought about their change in the whole skills dynamic. And that is, as Heather said, how we come up with the Skills Council as a model and how that works, but also linking that into the regional piece as well. So we have learned a lot from the Irish government's experience, and that relationship with business as well, I think, is really important, and how we engage with business. So that's something that we're trying to implement there, and that we will continue to engage through the development of the Peace Plus programme and the specific measure around skills that I mentioned earlier on, as a way of actually shared understanding, shared learning, what works, what doesn't work, and learning the lessons. So there is engagement with that development in Ireland.
Yeah, well, I think it should become now matter of fact that departments are cooperating with each other across the border. And it's not just a criticism of the northern departments, because in my time as Minister of Education, it was quite clear there was resistance in the Southern Department of Education to cooperation as well. People have got into the habit of working back to back rather than facing each other for the betterment of the people they serve along those border communities. So I think it's just, it's a mindset on both sides of the border. So I'm not just criticising the Northern departments, I can assure you. The returning older people to education and skills, well, one of the barriers people face is costs. How is the skills strategy going to support older people returning to either learning or new skill sets moving forward?
Graham, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, John. It is a big issue. It's probably one of the things that concerns me the most. Whenever you look at the profile of skills within our current labour market, they are relatively low, and perhaps the lowest whenever you look across UK and Ireland. So it is a concern, the fact that people aren't engaging in lifelong learning. So we intend to develop a plan to look at the actions that we can introduce. But in terms of free courses, I think that's a good way of actually addressing that. Our Skill Up programme is one way of doing that. We're delivering 7,000 free places in this academic year, and that ranges right from entry level right through to level 7. So, and we're getting a huge amount of uptake in that. So that just proves that actually there's a lot of appetite out there. But because there was a cost attached to that previously, that was perhaps prohibitive for individuals. So that's one of the first things that we are looking at, is actually can we extend and grow our Skill Up programme so that individuals can actually access the skills that they need. The second point I would make is actually around the culture that we have with the business community. So it's making sure that our business leaders out there recognise the need to upskill. If you look at our economy, it is changing so significantly, has even over the last couple of years, through automation, digitisation of process. So it's really important that businesses understand the need to actually invest in their staff within the company. So we've been working very closely with Invest in I to get that message across, but also provide interventions that will take the cost out of it for those companies. And we already have a range of courses or programs that we have within the department, such as Skills Focus and Innovate Us, as well as our Assured Skills Academies, that actually help those companies to upskill their workforce. So we have a range of interventions, John, that we already have, but I think it's important that we look at best practice and where other countries across the globe have tackled this issue and addressed it, because when you mentioned OECD earlier on, whenever they looked at the adult participation rate, we were significantly behind other countries. I think it was in around 32% of our current population undertook lifelong learning, and that's really low whenever you compare other parts of the UK or Ireland, indeed across Europe. So that's something that we're very keen to tackle and address. Given the changes in our economy, given the changing demands coming through, it's something that we need to tackle urgently, I think.
Okay. I'm visiting a welding academy in my constituency tomorrow. An initiative a company have set up. So I may be in contact with you over the next week or so, just in terms of how those interface with the skills strategy, how they interface with our local colleges as well, because as you know, it's one of those skill sets that is in huge and high demand out there moving forward. And the other thing is that the job losses in my constituency yesterday, JMC, a construction company, it was quite remarkable how many other companies were in contact with me saying, if those workers need a job, we need those skill sets. So there's clearly a skills deficit in the construction industry as well.
No, I agree with that, John. We're alert to that, and certainly we have a range of welding academies that we have established through our colleges, and there has been a very significant uptick in that. It's a 12-week programme, and those individuals then get an interview at the end of the academy, and we've had quite a lot of success in terms of those skills that are very much in demand, and we're working with the manufacturing sector here right across Northern Ireland to basically understand what the needs are and then putting those interventions, such as the welding academies, in place to meet that demand.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. I don't have anybody else indicating, I don't think, Peter.
No, Chair, no one else.
Look, thanks to the three of you for coming along today. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure you'll be keeping us updated as this develops over the next wee while. So thanks again.
Thank you.
So, members, we're going to move on then to item number 7, which is matters arising, and there's a few matters here. So, item 7.1 at page 205 is a copy of a departmental response regarding the recovery of wrongly issued or claimed COVID grants. The Department advises that the COVID Grants Fraud and Error Oversight Project was established to identify and address instances of fraud and error across the schemes and to instigate recovery procedures for overpayments where justifiable. This work is expected to continue for the remainder of this financial year. Appendix B details actual recoveries made at the 28th of September under all schemes and further recoveries anticipated from agreed settlement plans. As testing remains ongoing, further recovery action is anticipated. To date, 8 cases have been referred to the PSNI, and each of these has been reported to the Comptroller and Auditor General as is required for all fraud referrals. The PSNI are actively investigating 6 of these cases, and the remaining 2 are awaiting initial assessment. That's from members' note at this point. And Peter, I expect that we will be receiving the department's annual report at some point in the next short while as well, which may pick up on some of the other schemes to date as too.
Yes, Chair, we will be.
Okay. So moving on then to 7.2, page 242 of table papers, there's the departmental response regarding cancelled meetings between DFE and the Business and Culture Committee of Derry City Estraphan District Council over the past 18 months. The department has advised that it is incorrect to state that DFE has cancelled 3 meetings scheduled with the Derry Estraphan Council. The department outlines continued correspondence with Council regarding representations from the department. The department advises that depending on availability, officials would be happy to attend a future meeting to address the Council in relation to the Economic Recovery Action Plan and 10X vision. And I know Sinead wants to come in, so I'll let Sinead come in before we agree to the action.
Right. I'm really disappointed in the response, obviously. First of all, I'm concerned at the response, never mind disappointed at it, because I'm concerned the fact that the department are calling raising the issue incorrect and states that the DFE hasn't cancelled 3 meetings. I just want to state quite categorically what has happened here. An invitation was sent 17 months ago by Derry City and Strabane District Council for the department to attend their Business and Culture Committee, and a response was sent to say that the officials from Invest NI would continue to liaise. Now, a second letter then had to be sent a few weeks later, and then a response was issued to say that Invest NI would be instructed to attend the meeting. The officials didn't attend the meeting, and that they were meant to attend the meeting in September, and they didn't attend that meeting at all. So the third letter, nothing happened. Third letter was sent and called for Minister Dodds to attend a future presentation. A response was issued to say that depending on diary availability, the minister would attend, and obviously the minister was very, very busy and couldn't attend. Another then letter was subsequently sent to ask the new minister to attend a meeting, and he said that he would attend a meeting on the 14th of September, which was 16 months later. And then he was very, very busy, but they said that maybe officials then might attend the meeting, but they weren't available either. But they're very, very happy. They will attend just as soon as they can get themselves together and get a diary date. That's 17 months of pussyfooting about from officials, from Invest NI and from the minister. It's disgusting. And then they have had the audacity to write a letter and say, look, it's incorrect. No, you're incorrect. They haven't cancelled. They just haven't attended. But they haven't really cancelled. But they have. So I'm not taking this nonsense from the department. We are a committee. We deserve the respect of actually communicating and being factual and being proper with this. They can dance about in a pin and the head of the pin, but the fact is they were invited 17 months ago on the 8th of July, and we're sitting here in October, and the minister still hasn't been able to find a diary date, nor senior officials either. Not good enough.
Thanks, Sinead. Peter, perhaps we could go back to the department and urge, stress that they should make themselves available to attend the Business and Culture meeting or committee in Derry and Strabane Council, and in the interim we can share the response that has been given to us with Council as well, and they can take it up themselves if they wish to do so also.
Okay, Chair, we'll do that. Thank you.
John wants to come in there.
The point is, these are public servants. They're public servants. You know, this is elected representatives of Derry City Council, the second city in Northern Ireland, is requesting engagement with public service about economic development within the city and region. Surely that's the job and that's the role. Instead of sending letters and dancing on the head of a pin about what was cancelled and what wasn't cancelled. It's disingenuous, and the facts speak for themselves.
Sure. Can I go ahead, Chair? Yes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Central government is often criticised for not doing things in a joint up way. I think that's often correct. But I think there is a genuine case here to be answered. Councils are major economic players and play a significant role in their own right and through their own constitution and work. But I think working relationships between councils and all government departments is vital for the betterment of our people, but particularly in relation to economic development, and the city deals and all these things come into that. But anyone who served on council will know the importance of the work they do, and it's been quite a while since I've been on a council. But from then even, they've taken on more responsibilities and I think have a more strategic direction and role. So I certainly would encourage any department to be engaging directly with councils. I accept officials, they're being brought before the economy committee, there are other committees and all that sort of stuff, but it's not too much to ask for either the officials or the minister to pay one visit at this stage to a strategic committee of council and to engage with them and set out and work out a common pathway for any area. Thank you.
John, they're meant to be partners. They're partners in economic development, major partners and friends. They should be. The DUP are letting the city down and they need to wise up.
Yeah. Okay, so if members are agreed, we'll take forward what we have suggested. So moving on then to 7.3, which is at page 243 of table papers, there's a copy of correspondence from the Minister to Include Youth regarding the closure of Include Youth Essential Skills Programme. The Minister has declined an invitation to meet with Include Youth due to diary commitments and offers a meeting with special advisors and officials. The committee wrote recently outlining concerns around the closure of the programme and to urge the department to engage with Include Youth. So members are content that we would ask for details of that meeting, and obviously we can share this with Include Youth as we've done previously. The members content?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on then, 7.4 at page 244 of table papers, there's correspondence from an individual regarding the progress of the community renewal funding and the shared prosperity funding. So if members are content that we would forward that on to the department for a response. Okay.
Thank you.
So moving on then to item number 8, which is our correspondence. 8.1, there is a copy of correspondence from the Committee for Infrastructure regarding HGV driver issues. At its meeting on the 6th of October, the Infrastructure Committee received a joint briefing from the Road Haulage Association and Logistics UK in relation to HGV driver issues and agreed to write to the Department for Economy on a number of the issues raised. So that's for members to note at this stage. 8.2 then, page 215, there's a copy of correspondence from the Chairperson's Liaison Group regarding information on proposals for new or amended EU laws. The CLG, following correspondence from the Finance Committee, has written to the Executive Office to outline that it's vital that Assembly committees are made aware not just of any proposals to make or change EU laws that fall within the devolved competence of the Assembly, but also of Executive Department's assessment and analysis of the impact of such proposals. the CLG has requested that the reviews of executive departments are sought by the British Government on amendments to EU law listed in annexes of the protocol or new EU legislation within the scope of the protocol, but which does not amend or replace EU acts listed in the annexes, that each department engages with the relevant Assembly Committee prior to finalising its input to the final Government explanatory memorandum and provides a final copy of the explanatory memorandum to the Committee. So again, that's for members to note at this stage. So moving on then, 8.3, page 239, there's a written ministerial statement from the Finance Minister regarding the RHI inquiry report and how the findings of the report are being taken forward. So again, that's for members to note. 8.4 then, at page 241, there's correspondence from Open University inviting the Chair and Committee members to a lunch in the members' dining room with the University Secretary, who will be visiting from England on the 25th of October. So members would let the committee office know if they wish to attend that lunch. Then at page 242, there's correspondence from Head of Facilities at Wiggle regarding COVID restrictions, seeking clarification on when there will be further guidance on a return to office working. So members are agreed we would forward that on to the Executive Office for a response. Okay, so page 243, there's correspondence from a individual regarding flags and the impact on his business and on tourism generally. So members are content that we will forward that to the department to ask if it is aware of any work ongoing to assess the impact of flags on the tourism industry. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then 8.7 at page 245, there's correspondence from PPE Solutions regarding rapid COVID testing. So that one is for members to note. And then at 8.8, there's correspondence from ICBAN, which is the local authority-led cross-border development organisation for the Central Border region regarding a request to meet the committee on its new strategy. So members are content that we would set up that meeting. Yep.
Thank you.
And then at page 247, there's a copy of the third report of the examiner's statutory rules, and that's for members to note. And then 246, there of table papers, there's a copy of the Chartered Institute of Building response to the Department's consultation on the skills strategy. So again, that's for members to note. And then at page 254 of table papers, there's a copy of correspondence from an individual regarding grants available in Scotland to improve ventilation in high-risk settings, including bars, restaurants and gyms. And the members are content that we will forward that to the department for a response.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on then to item number 9, which is any other business. And I know John has indicated that he wishes to raise an item under any other business. So John, if you want to pick that up.
Chair, it was in relation to the job losses at a local construction company, JMC, and the information flow to local workers about redundancies and wages owed to them. Now, over this last 24 hours, I've been able to clarify much of that stuff, and more information has come forward. So the issues I wish to raise directly with the committee have been resolved and clarified. So thank you.
Thank you, John. I haven't had any other AOB highlighted, Peter. No.
Chair, the Deputy Chair's indicating.
So,
ahead,
just,
please.
Kiva, our chair, I was wondering, have we got an update regarding the tourism voucher? Because the minister spoke about it in the assembly the other day, and there seems to be it's a movable feast when it's actually going to be available. Can we get a briefing or an update on it? Because I'm just unsure what's happening there.
No problem. Peter, we had a briefing scheduled with Tourism NI, was it last week or the week before, and it was
they had
postponed,
cancelled. Or we had to.
So we'll seek to get that rescheduled.
Chair, I think we had cancelled, or they had cancelled. So we're seeking to reschedule that on that issue.
Okay. And I think, is Claire looking to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose in a similar vein, is there a hotline even for MLAs in relation to the High Street Voucher scheme? Whenever people apply for the scheme, the email comes back very specifically telling people to contact the department. However, there are issues, and in some cases they might be very specific to the individual or the card or the details. People are concerned that they could run out of time to apply for the scheme. And even on that point, could we seek clarity that if people have submitted an application, if there was an issue that the application hadn't concluded by the deadline, will they still be able to fulfil that and get it even after that deadline? I don't know what the issues are. There seems to be a few poking up here and there, but people just feel a wee bit in limbo, and certainly as an elected representative I do as well. The only mechanism is a parliamentary question, which takes at minimum 10 days to reply. So could we get a hotline or even an email?
Chair,
Can we take that up with the department?
Chair, we have been feeding the issues as they're raised with the committee office live to the department, so we'll feed those issues through again and reiterate again the issue of somewhere for members to go. I appreciate that some of the issues that have been flagged up really do need direct contact with a person to discuss because they have all sorts of implications. So we will continue seeking that, pressing for it, and also our request for a regular update on the number of cards issued, the geographical coverage, etc. This was the dashboard that the committee had flagged up quite a while back. So we will continue to put those requests in. As soon as we have anything back, Chair, we'll put it out to members immediately rather than wait for the pack.
John, can you come in there?
Yeah, Chair, I'm reflecting again Claire's experience in this. I've had one lady with me who had went through the application process, and this issue of someone else has used that national insurance number has come up. Now, I think it was the 29th of September. This lady reported it, and she had no feedback whatsoever from the department in that regard. So I think there needs to be some emphasis put on even acknowledging the email that the issue is going to be looked into, and trying to reassure people that if their claim is legitimate, they won't lose out on the card as well.
Okay, Peter, we will reflect that back.
Yep, thanks, Chair. We have that it's going live to the department as we speak.
Okay, thank you. So moving on then to item number 10, which is the date, time and place of the next meeting, which is next Wednesday, the 20th of October in the Senate chamber. This is a concurrent meeting with the Education Committee on the 14 to 19 strategy, and so members will be briefed by both Department for Education and Economy officials. And then our committee will move on to its own agenda once the concurrent meeting ends. And just to remind members that tomorrow's informal meeting with NICIC retail section has been cancelled due to illness. So that's us for today. Thank you, Peter.
Chair.
Thank you.
Well done to the chair, because